What was your I need to grow up moment that actually made you grow up? When I was 15, I had to kick out one of my mother's clients when she was getting raped, prostituting herself to put food on the table. Didn't have much of a childhood and don't speak with my family much anymore. Just made sure they were off well enough to no longer need me. Forgot how to have fun and experience joy in general, always being serious about the tiniest thing, but I'm on my way back. Holy shit, that sounds rough. Take as long as you need to change and you'll get there eventually. Clearly you're an incredibly strong person for making it this far. I was 15. I had a stepfather who hated kids, and my mom had 4, me being the youngest. The eldest 2 bailed as soon as they had the chance, because our family was terribly dysfunctional. Stepdad would get drunk and abuse my mom. We tried many times to stop him or get the cops involved, but she always backed him up, so fuck it, her dog, her fleas. There came a day when stepdad decided that he didn't want to abuse mom. He's come upstairs after me. Being a malnourished 15-year-old facing a drunken ex-boxer with a history of violence was enough to make a boy freeze up. I couldn't freeze up, though, or my life would basically be over. I couldn't let the next 5 minutes go his way. So by the time he got to the top of the steps, I was waiting for him with a baseball bat. Not as much of an equalizer as Sam Colt would recommend, but it did the trick. I beat the monster. I grew up. My mom and stepdad moved out almost immediately, her choosing him over us. She said when we graduated high school, she'd sell the house, so be ready. But my next oldest brother, it was just him and me at that point, was into drinking and threw me out. Good times. Edit, thank you for my first gold, kind Redditor. I have been answering some questions below. Perhaps I should write that book. I hear that all the time. Well, fuck. Lol, right? Just got worse and worse until it ended in a big ole pile of shit. When I was 23, I got my supervisor pregnant. I broke up with her right before she told me. We decided the best course of action was to give the baby up for adoption. The mother had undiagnosed borderline personality disorder. She was practically a textbook case, and came from a toxic family, so I spent 9 agonizing months putting up with emotional abuse and manipulation to make sure she went through with it and save that little boy from a life of hell. We gave him to a nice gay couple. The mother hates me and blames me. I still feel like what I did was the most fatherly thing I could do at the time. If he wants to look me up when he's older, I'll be waiting. I was 24 when I knocked up my boss, who also turned out to be completely insane, literally, institutionalized several times, has undergone court-ordered psych evils, etc. I stuck it out and am now father with sole custody, but I understand that not everyone is in a place to do that, and I commend you for being the best father you could be under the circumstances. I hope your kid does reach out when you're both ready, because you sound like a good person. Hitting rock bottom from booze, blow and pills. Coming up on 4 years clean and sober. Glad to be on the green side of the dirt. Jesus, yes, this. When you're actively using, sometimes it just doesn't feel like you'll ever have the willpower and wherewithal to seek help and move forward, until you get to rock bottom. I had to hit that first before I could move forward. I started teaching right out of college at age 22. I got a job in a Title I school teaching 5th grade science and social studies. Most students were held back at least once, and I had several students who were 12 and 13 years old. On the first day of school, I remember feeling so strange that I could shut my classroom door and be trusted to be responsible for the science and civic education of 93 sections of 30 kids, 5th graders. At age 22. My first few years of teaching taught me a lot about how the world worked. I also grew a thick skin, learned to stand up for myself, and developed a desire to always improve myself. Goddamn, that weird hollow feeling when the person doing your induction/orientation leaves the classroom for the last time and it's just a thin slice of wood between you and your first class. In my late 20s my mom needed open heart surgery, so I moved home for over a year to look after her. Up until that point I honestly can't think of a single responsible thing I had really done. That's a big move to sacrifice what you currently have and go all the way back home to look after her. I'm sure she appreciates it more than you think. If you don't mind me asking, why did she need the surgery? She caught a fever in college, around 1959, which led to a heart condition called rheumatic heart disease. https://www.hopkinsmedicine.org/health/conditions and diseases/rheumatic heart disease. So she's had 3 major cardiac surgeries in her life, one each in the 80s, 90s and aughts. The one in the 90s was the one I had to move home for, as she had 2 of her heart valves replaced with mechanical ones, which were prone to complications. They saved her life, well, until they wore out in the aughts and had to be replaced with pig's valves. But she was in and out of the hospital for most of a year until said complications were dealt with. While all of that sounds bad, I should mention her mom had the same heart problem and passed away at 41 years old, and my mom is celebrating her 81st birthday in a few weeks and she feels okay. Modern medicine is great. Walking into the rehab center I had left 6 months prior. December 2006, I had been a drug addict for 15 years and even the people who desperately loved me were about to cut me off. I knew in my heart that this was my last chance to get my life in order, otherwise it would be the end. Well, tell us how you're doing now. Good, I hope. When I realized that I needed to start socializing with people, otherwise I couldn't get anywhere in life. I'm mostly an introvert and I hate to go outside because the grind never stops. At some point though I realized that if I never socialized I wouldn't make any friends and would never feel good about myself whatsoever. Ever since that moment, I started going out with people, chatting with people online. I started expressing myself a little better and might have a girlfriend soon. Honestly, a good thing. I'd if this all fits as a grow-up moment, but I hope it does. How did you ever bring yourself to do this? I'm in the exact same spot. Every part of my life is dialed in other than the social aspect. I like to think I'm a hard worker, a good student, and I'm very communicative when it comes to duties like work, school, and sports, but when it comes to just hanging out and actual socializing I avoid it like the plague. It depresses the living crap out of me both knowing that I have to make friends and girlfriends, not just colleagues and acquaintances. So, how did you ever just start being a social person in the way you described? If you want to be social, if that's something you truly want, you have to be willing to accept pain at first. It may be painful to reach out to people, painful to join new groups, painful to be rejected or ghosted. There's no magic to it. But if you can accept the pain in exchange for making progress toward the good stuff, then you will eventually make progress. Woke up on the median in the busiest part of town. Passing in and out on acid. No shoes, no shirt, and my car keys 10 miles away from home. Called my parents at 5:30 am and knew what had to be done. Greater than called my parents at 5:30 am and knew what had to be done. When I started going out and becoming more independent, my dad said something which, at the time made me go like, yeah okay sure, but that I've come to appreciate more as I got older. Basically he said something like, we'll always be more upset if you don't call us than if you do, meaning if it was me in your situation, they'd be so angry and disappointed, but even more so if I had been in that situation and not called for help. Thankfully I've never been in a situation where I've had to call them for help in the middle of the night, so far. Waking up from my nap and I was still in the cell. I'm not sure if this counts, but when I realized how toxic my life was around me, family, professionally diagnosed mental health, abusive relationships etc., I finally realized I needed to get my shit together and be a grown-up. I got myself out of my family's house and moved into my own apartment with 2 people, and I fell in love with one of them and we are talking about getting married now. Realizing that going to IT school to become a programmer when I wasn't even interested in that line of work was why I had depression, was alone, and always angry. I now am going for art and design, have incredibly calmed down, and found myself the love of my life. My husband has depression and lost his job a few months back, so he's not in a good place right now. We're late 20s and have always muddled through together, but this is the lowest he's ever been. Stepping up to keep us going through this has definitely made me grow up. The positive side is that we're coping well and he's getting help. I'm quite proud of us. Hope you guys get to a better place soon. I'm glad to know you support him. Keep being a great human. After I dropped out of college, I worked at a Home Depot as a cashier for a while. Then I got fired for never showing up on time. After not being able to cut it as a cashier in retail, I thought, it's probably time to get my act together, huh? I did. Currently write code that organizes financial data. But do you still show up late to work? Tongue? Not him, but one of the great perks about coding is that late to work is often a pretty flexible concept. Sure, you've got the occasional meeting you can't miss, and you need to get your work done and be online/in office enough hours for anyone who needs your help to get a hold of you, but it's still way more flexible than any sort of shift work. Realizing that I want to spend my life with someone, but don't have the means to move in with them, get married, start a life, etc. I started driving. I haven't driven due to fear and mostly got rides everywhere, and got a real job. I'm saving up to get a home with my partner so we can have a happy life together. Edit, writing most of my replies at work. Just finishing my lunch break. I'm proud of myself for pushing myself to get here to this point. And I want you all to know that you can do it, too. I believe in you. How did you get over your fear of driving? I was afraid of driving as well, and I'm going to be doing my final driving test next month to become a fully licensed driver in Canada. The best way to get over this fear is to just do it. Just practice. Honestly, you just have to keep doing it and get better at it to not feel afraid. How can you feel confident in your driving if you don't get good at it? And how else will you develop that skill except for just doing it? What worked for me was I paid for 2 1.5-hour driving lessons that made a world of difference. I went from sweating and shaking when trying to drive to driving as if it was no big deal. It wasn't that I needed to be taught how to drive since I knew how to do it, but I had to get into a car with someone who would make me feel safe and who could stop the car if I made a mistake, and just trust myself to practice my skills until I felt confident. Now the only reason I'm nervous about this test next month is not because of my driving abilities, but because of a health issue I'm dealing with at the moment, making me unable to make the test. Paying rent for the first time. I once paid rent to my old landlord and rent and security for my new place in one day. Adulting sucks. I had that one too. It was $1,800 total, which was like all I had at the time. It was the lead into some very stressful times. Why the hell am I spending so much money every month servicing credit card interest? Can I really not control my spending? Am I really that impulsive? Met my wife, wasn't on a bad path but had no real direction. Realized very quickly she was not going to stick around if I had no direction. I went to a party where I knew my ex was going to be with his girlfriend. We dated for about 4 years and had been broken up for 2 years at that point. He started dating his girlfriend within a few months of us breaking up, and I guess I hadn't gotten over how much that hurt me. So I brought a date to the party, told everybody he was my boyfriend, and got absolutely trashed. I woke up the next day and hated myself. I realized I needed to let it go, so I did. That was a huge growing up moment for me. I feel this. Dated a girl for 6 years and it was over in one day. It'll be 2 years since we've broken up in October and I still haven't let go. The heartbreak is still there, but slowly I think I'm getting there. Don't want to let that person or experience keep affecting my life. At 16, when my mother had a stroke, then at 17 when she moved out. I was forced to provide for myself. Right now I'm going through a rough patch and want to cry, but I've learned if I keep doing my thing I'll get things back to normal. It's just so damn hard, even when I have friends that support me emotionally. I don't want to dump all my problems on them and some stuff I don't have answers to. I'm 31 and I hope once I complete my education, in a few years, and start making more money I can being so scared of losing everything and my anxiety will be better. When I was 22 to 23 I would always insult my brother as a joke. I never complimented him or anything. One day he kind of exploded on me and before I could say something I realized he was right. All I did was try to bring him down for no reason. I stopped, which ironically enough annoyed him for a while because I would throw in compliments and stopped insulting him. I met a girl freshman year of college and we were just like that, constantly dissing each other and pretending we found it funny. One time we were drunk and she told me, "I don't think you've ever said one nice thing to me." Up until that point, I'd never thought of it that way. I stated dialing back on the insults and she did the same. Flash forward to a few years later, and we're best friends who actively try to build each other up instead of breaking each other down for laughs. Be nice to your friends. Had a toxic friend like this, I pointed it out and tried to do what I could on my part, but they wanted to stay toxic. We are no longer friends, which sucks cause I don't have many. When my mom was dying, I had to square with a whole lot of suck it up and deal moments with myself so that shit could get done. She'd been sick for a long while, but had always been private about it until the last few months, when she was rapidly getting worse, especially when my grandmother also got horribly ill at the same time. I got used to the sight/smell of bile real fast and with the fact that I needed to catch my mom's puke in a bowl because she couldn't walk to the toilet. I got used to spending nights and weekends in hospital rooms so that mom would have someone with her while dad was checking in on grandma. I got used to calmly talking about end-of-life arrangements, because that stuff had to be taken care of. I even got used to not being able to talk about it with anyone, because who was I going to spill to? Everyone else in the family was dealing with a much worse scenario than I was. It sucked horribly and it was the worst year of my life, but it was definitely a growing experience in terms of just learning how to get shit done, even in the most horrific circumstances. I am glad that you were able to do all of those things, but have you had someone to talk to since? I had a year where both sides of my grandparents lost one of them. I was the glue. Not having someone to talk to took its toll until I was able to realize I needed someone to, 4 years later. If you haven't yet, please find someone to help you lift that from your shoulder. PM me if you want. Yep, I was in a similar situation, though my family members came out of it all alive. I was the glue too. I struggled but couldn't talk to anyone. Ended up using alcohol to cope, became alcoholic, but now I'm sober. Smile. Right when I graduated college and moved out on my own, I received around a $100,000 inheritance and started spending money like it was nothing, to the point where I finally checked my financials and realized I had spent $30,000 in 9 months. It was only when I ran through the numbers that I realized I was being a total, complete idiot. I think this really helped later on in life, though. It caused me to save and invest as much money as possible, even when I had a really well-paying job. While people at my level were buying either a Lexus or a Mercedes, I was clinging on to my Honda Civic, then later bought a Prius. Wait, $30,000 for 9 months ends up to being around $3,300 per month, depending on the area you live in. That could be an average day-to-day lifestyle. Source: live in the Bay Area. Arrested for BDFI, being a drunken fucking idiot. Realized that almost every problem in my life was related to the fact that I was acting like a drunken frat boy at 27 years old. I never quit drinking completely, but I stopped making it the focal point of my life. My entire life turned around immediately. When every story you tell starts with, we were fucking wasted, you know your life is totally focused around alcohol. Got a buddy like that. This one time, we were totally wasted. Had to tell him to stop saying that because we always just assumed he naturally was anytime he was doing anything. A mentor and a man I admired greatly listened to me tell him why, once again, my fuck up wasn't my fault. He looked me straight in the eye and quietly said I had really high expectations for you and you haven't shown me a damn thing. Ouch. That turned me around. It took a few years but I earned his respect again and I promised myself I would never hear someone say that to me again. My wife dying and leaving me with our 3 kids. I'd always been very immature up until then. My spouse died and left me with 2 kids. I'm responsible for 100% of their well-being. If I don't do it, it doesn't get done. That means I do all of the finances, listen to their stories, help with homework, get them to sports, go to their school events, everything. I've always been responsible but it's hard because now I don't have my person that has my back. There's simply no person to break up the monotony of it all. I can never say I don't know, go ask your dad. I am on call every minute of every day. It's exhausting and I wouldn't choose this for anyone. And of course we are trying to hold it together while grieving in private. Good for you for stepping up. Single parenting is the hardest thing I've ever had to go through. Just keep doing the best you can. Come over to r/widowers if you're not already there. The look of disappointment on my wife's face when we received our 3rd eviction notice while on vacation with my family. I spent the money on everything else rather than paying bills first. I got pulled over doing 90 miles per hour in a 55. I was 17, and in my state is when you are legally an adult. Was still high school and on my way back from my military drill that weekend. The officer had me stop the engine, get out, and then proceeded to handcuff me on the side of the road, in my uniform, and has me sit on the grass. Then we proceeded to have a nice long talk about making choices and the consequences of my actions if I had crashed or lost control and what would happen if he booked me for this, reckless endangerment, operating a motor vehicle 35 miles per hour in excess of the speed limit, reckless driving. I was going to be one fucked teenager. He then took off the handcuffs, handed me my keys, and told me that he had never seen my name come up anywhere for anything ever again, before letting me go. I was shaking so bad I could barely drive off the highway. Suffice to say, I've never had another traffic violation. Major props to the good cop who taught you a major lesson and let you go rather than book you for all those things. Great example of effective instruction/correction. My uncle is a cop, and he says when he pulls young drivers over he does his best to make them cry. Asks questions about what they would do if a kid ran out to see their mom on the other side of the street, etc., and just grills them, making them feel guilty about being negligent. If they end up crying, guys and girls often will, he lets them off. Makes a much bigger and longer lasting impact than a fine and a couple points on their license. Being prepared to kill my ex-wife and the dude she was fucking on my couch. I realized I needed to live my life for myself. Whatever happened to them? He left under his own free will, and I left the next morning. I returned a few days later, while she was at school, to get the rest of my shit. I've kept track of her over the years since, and convinced her next husband, who also caught her cheating, to take everything because they were in an at-fault state. He kept the nice house, the cars, and the bank accounts. She had to move in with her mother a few states away. I had a child. It wasn't just me and my adult, fully capable wife who could take up the slack if I screwed up. I now had this helpless little person relying on me. Until she was born, I hadn't held a job for over a year. I then had that job for 8 years, and when I did switch jobs there was a significant pay increase, and now I've been there 4 years. Congratulations on doing so well for your family. When I was born my dad decided to continue wasting his time, and left my mum alone to raise me. I don't think I'll ever forgive him. My GF's brother is doing this with his child and it's wild. Basically, her mom and other fam raise his kid while he plays video games all day. He just recently got his first job and it doesn't pay well either. His daughter's mom is also insane and isn't in the picture. Pretty fucked from all sides.